Harley's biggest secret just slipped out, and nobody was supposed to see this. Something inside the Street Glide story doesn't add up, and the deeper we looked, the darker it got. The company's silence? Not an accident. The documents? Not rumors. And what they reveal will shake the idea of American steel to its core. If you've ever trusted that badge, this will hit hard. Stay till the end, because the truth Harley tried to bury is finally roaring to the surface. We bought the dream. We grew up believing that Harley-Davidson was more than a brand. It was an oath, a symbol of freedom that ran through every mile of American asphalt. The Street Glide was the crown jewel, the perfect mix of muscle and style, built for the long haul. When we swung a leg over that saddle for the first time, we weren't just buying a motorcycle. We were buying a promise. Chrome that gleamed like pride, sound that roared like defiance. The Street Glide wasn't supposed to be a machine. It was supposed to be an identity. But somewhere inside Milwaukee's boardrooms, that identity became a product line. And while we were polishing our tanks and planning cross-country rides, Harley was making decisions we never agreed to. Recent investigations revealed that the company concealed extensive reports of quality control failures tied directly to the Street Glide. They knew about the cracks in the armor and said nothing. What we thought was craftsmanship turned out to be compromise hidden under layers of paint and marketing. We, the riders, believed in American steel. We thought buying Harley meant supporting the kind of pride that built this country. Yet those leaks showed that somewhere along the line, pride got traded for profit. Every roar of that engine suddenly felt like a question. How much of what we love is still real? We didn't buy a machine. We bought a myth, and the myth betrayed us. And that betrayal didn't show up in headlines first. It showed up on the road, the day the clutch gave out. It always starts the same way. You pull the clutch in at a red light, the engine idles low, and for a split second the lever feels soft. Then nothing. The gear won't disengage, traffic moves, you don't. Panic sets in. For many Street Glide riders, that moment wasn't a freak occurrence. It was the beginning of a pattern. Thousands of us felt the clutch fail beneath our hands, locking bikes in gear, sometimes right in the middle of intersections. Harley stayed quiet. Service centers mumbled about isolated issues, but the numbers didn't lie. Riders were reporting near misses, blown clutches, and shattered trust. When the first recall came, it was wrapped in technical language and half-truths. Harley described it as a minor hydraulic defect. We knew better. A clutch that fails without warning isn't a small issue. It's a heartbeat between control and catastrophe. For a company built on brotherhood, silence felt like betrayal. We were told to keep our loyalty, to wait for parts, to trust the system. But loyalty works both ways. When the bikes we paid for began turning on us, we realized something deeper. Harley didn't just let a defect slip through, they let riders down. Each failed clutch wasn't just a part malfunction. It was a symbol that the brotherhood had been replaced by boardroom math. But a soft clutch wasn't the only thing that stopped working. Soon, so did the brakes. If you've ever felt that gut punch of realizing a brand you trusted let you down, hit like. It shows the world riders still care about honesty. And drop a comment below. Share your own Harley story, because your voice proves this community is stronger than any corporate silence. Brakes that quit on the open road. You don't forget the moment the lever goes dead. 1 second you're cruising, the next you squeeze and feel nothing but air. It happened to riders on the open highway and mountain passes, even rolling into stoplights. The Street Glide's brakes, especially the anti-lock system, started failing because of trapped moisture and neglected recalls. Riders found out the hard way that Harley's so-called safety systems weren't built to last the long winters or the long rides. The recall letters arrived late, sometimes years after the first complaints. By then, some riders had already gone down. Others, lucky enough to catch the warning signs early, had their bikes towed in and waited months for parts. Harley called it a maintenance oversight. We called it negligence. A brake failure on a machine that weighs over 800 pounds isn't a statistic. It's a near-death experience. We trusted that badge with our lives. We believed Harley when they said these machines were engineered for freedom. Yet when the brakes failed, it wasn't freedom we felt. It was fear. Those of us who survived the failure carried more than scars. We carried a new kind of awareness. The company that once taught America how to ride had forgotten how to stop. And if the brakes didn't end the ride, the oil beneath our boots almost did. Riders look out for riders. The reliable gear I actually use is linked below. No hype, just protection. Oil under our boots. At first, it looked like a minor leak. A dark spot under the bike, a streak down the side of the crankcase. Then came the smell, the smoke, and the sudden slide. The oil line clamp failure on the Street Glide wasn't rare. It was routine. Thousands of riders reported it, and Harley brushed it off as a small production hiccup. But when your rear tire hits a slick of your own oil at 70 miles an hour, it's not small, it's lethal. We started comparing notes. Different states, same story. Leaks near the oil filter, oil blowing back onto riders' legs, pressure warnings ignored until it was too late. Harley's official recall used careful language, downplaying the risk. They said, a potential oil leak could occur. We said, a potential life could end. The difference between those sentences tells you everything about who still rides for passion and who only counts profits. And here's what cut the deepest. Those leaks were known internally long before we saw them. The documents proved it. Engineers had logged reports. Suppliers had flagged weak clamps, yet the line kept running. Why? Because redesigning a part costs money. Recalling loyalty doesn't. We used to think oil under our boots was part of the charm, the mark of a well-ridden bike. Now we know better. That slick sheen on the pavement isn't nostalgia, it's evidence. The company told us to keep riding, to keep believing. But belief can only carry you so far before it turns into denial. And when we found out they knew all along, that's when the trust snapped. The memos we weren't supposed to see. When the first leaks hit the forums, most of us thought they were rumors, angry talk from riders who felt cheated. But then the documents surfaced. They weren't stories, they were memos, real ones, signed, dated, and stamped with Harley's internal seals. They showed meetings where engineers pleaded for fixes that would have cost a few dollars per bike. Management rejected them, one by one, calculating warranty exposure like it was just another budget line. They didn't see riders, they saw statistics, they put math over miles. Inside those pages, you could almost hear the tension. Engineers wrote about parts wearing too fast, oil lines splitting under pressure, and bearings that wouldn't last half the projected lifespan. The same people who designed the heart of the Street Glide were watching it fail and begging to stop production until the problems were solved. Their emails described unacceptable risk to rider safety. The reply from management was chillingly short. Proceed with current design until further notice. That further notice never came. Reading those words felt like opening a wound we didn't know we had. Every mile, every vibration we once called character suddenly felt like corporate negligence. They told us the Street Glide was tested beyond reason, but the truth was the testing data had been edited to hide flaws. We weren't paranoid. We were right. Harley knew their signature touring model was built on compromises that could get us hurt, and they rolled it out anyway. But memos don't build motorcycles, factories do. And that's where the next layer of betrayal was hiding. Quality control myths. The Milwaukee plant was once a temple of pride. Generations of craftsmen built bikes that defined American freedom. But inside the walls during the Street Glide era, that pride had turned into process charts and production quotas. Former workers said the phrase quality control had lost its meaning. Inspections became a box to tick, not a promise to keep. Bikes rolled off the line because schedules mattered more than standards. You could walk the floor and see the difference. Old-timers who once measured every tolerance by feel were replaced or pushed aside. New managers talked about efficiency, not excellence. Components that failed early tests were adjusted until they barely passed. The goal wasn't to make it perfect, it was to make it out the door. Workers who questioned the changes were told to keep quiet or find another job. Pride was replaced by pressure. Those who stayed did their best, patching over flaws they weren't allowed to fix. One machinist described tightening oil line clamps by hand even when the torque spec was wrong, because he didn't want to send out a bike that could bleed oil on the highway. That kind of quiet defiance became its own resistance. But it shouldn't have come to that. We thought Harley's badge meant built to last. Turns out it meant built to budget. The same steel that once symbolized rebellion had been melted down into compliance. And when the assembly line ignored the warning signs, the blame didn't stop at the factory. It was passed straight to us. Warranty games. When the failures started stacking up, riders went to their dealers expecting help. Instead, they got paperwork, denial letters, excuses, aggressive riding, aftermarket modifications, improper maintenance. The company that told us to ride hard was now using that spirit against us. They said we abused our bikes. We call it riding. Behind the scenes, leaked service documents explained why. Harley had quietly set rejection targets, percentages of claims that should be denied to keep costs down. Dealers were instructed to look for any reason, no matter how minor, to void coverage. A missing oil change receipt? Denied. A different air filter? Denied. Even stock bikes that had never seen a wrench outside a dealership were turned away. Each denied claim saved the company a few $100s, and every dollar saved was marked as recovered margin. For the riders, it wasn't about money, it was about principle. We bought into loyalty. We thought that after years of paying premium prices, Harley would stand by us when their machines faltered. Instead, they turned the warranty into a wall. Riders began to realize the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, to protect the company, not the community. That's when our loyalty began to shift. The people caught in the middle of that shift weren't corporate strategists. They were the ones standing behind the counter. Dealers in the crossfire. Walk into a small-town Harley dealership, and you'll feel it right away. The tension in the air, the unease behind the smiles. Dealers had once been the face of the brand, the local ambassadors of Milwaukee's pride. But when the scandals and warranty battles started piling up, those same dealers were trapped between two loyalties: the company that supplied their bikes and the riders who trusted their word. Some tried to play it straight, quietly helping customers even when corporate said no. They'd push warranty claims through, eat the labor costs, and hope the goodwill kept their shops alive. Others followed orders, blaming riders for problems they knew were real. Either way, they lost. When parts shortages hit, shops sat on half-repaired bikes for months, forced to explain delays they didn't cause. Customers grew angry, and the frontline employees absorbed all of it. Some dealers spoke off record, revealing threats from corporate reps to deny too many repairs. We used to sell freedom. Now we sell apologies, one said. Once our family, dealers became trapped like us, forced to defend what they didn't break. Many shuddered, others bent rules to survive a storm born in distant boardrooms. When the company shut its doors on us, we turned to each other. The forum detectives. When the company went silent, we got louder. Late at night, garages across the country glowed with laptop screens and half-torn engines. Riders who once argued over chrome finishes began comparing serial numbers instead. Forums turned into war rooms. Someone posted a screenshot of a dealer bulletin, another dropped a scanned memo, and before long, we were connecting the dots faster than any newsroom ever could. We weren't waiting for Harley's answers anymore. We were building our own. It started small. One rider mapped failures by production date, another traced patterns between specific plants. By the end of the month, we had VIN lists, spreadsheets, and timelines that told the real story. The Street Glide wasn't failing randomly, it was failing systematically, and we could prove it. Every time a new recall notice went out, riders already knew which part would break next. We became our own recall department, funded by frustration. But as the truth spread through the forums, a new reality hit us. It wasn't just our engines breaking down. It was the value of our bikes, our pride, and our investments. The price of distrust. Every rider knows that a Harley used to be money in the bank. You could buy one, ride it for years, and still sell it for nearly what you paid. The Street Glide was once the crown jewel of that economy. But when the leaks went public, the market collapsed overnight. Prices fell like loose bolts on a bad road. Riders who had spent decades treating their bikes as heirlooms suddenly couldn't give them away. It wasn't just about resale value, it was about betrayal of belief. One rider in Ohio shared how his 2015 Street Glide, once appraised at $20,000, couldn't fetch $10,000. Another in Arizona tried trading his in for a newer model, only to be told the dealership wasn't taking them anymore. The phrase death rattle became a negotiation term. Mechanics whispered it, buyers avoided it. Our machines, once a symbol of pride, had turned into reminders of corporate greed. Harley didn't just devalue a motorcycle, they devalued a legacy. We bought these bikes believing they were investments in identity, rolling monuments to freedom. Now, they were liabilities. For the first time, owning a Harley felt like holding stock in a company that had betrayed its shareholders, the riders themselves. We didn't lose money, we lost faith. And that loss revealed something even bigger. This wasn't just one bad bike. The infection had spread across the lineup. If you've made it this far, you're part of something bigger than a video. You're part of a movement demanding truth on two wheels. Hit subscribe and stay with us, because the next story we uncover will make Harley's scandal look small. This fight isn't over. It's just beginning. Beyond the Street Glide. Once we had the data, it was impossible to unsee it. The Street Glide wasn't an exception. It was a symptom. Reports from Electra Glide, Road King, and Ultra Classic owners began pouring in. The same failures, the same denials, the same hollow apologies. This wasn't a bad batch. It was a bad philosophy. Harley had applied the same cost-cutting logic across multiple touring platforms, hoping the reputation would cover the cracks. But when the first cracks widened, the whole image began to crumble. Some of us wanted to believe the company would learn. Instead, we saw recycled designs and rebranded fixes. A new gasket here, a renamed part there, cosmetic solutions to mechanical rot. Even newer models showed signs of the same shortcuts. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't about engineering, it was about priorities. Harley stopped building for the rider and started building for the report sheet. The rebellion grew from frustration to mission. We started warning new buyers, posting inspection guides, even meeting in garages to show each other how to replace flawed parts. Independent mechanics hosted workshops for free, teaching riders what the company wouldn't. Every wrench turned in those garages was a protest. Every rebuilt engine a middle finger to corporate indifference. We weren't customers anymore. We were caretakers of a legacy too important to leave in the wrong hands. And when the rebellion grew loud enough, the noise stopped being background chatter. It became evidence that couldn't be ignored. Turning noise into evidence. At first, Harley treated us like static, just a few angry riders making noise online. But that noise started forming patterns, and those patterns became proof. We documented every failure, every denied claim, every letter the company ignored. Screenshots turned into spreadsheets, spreadsheets into reports, and reports into a movement. Riders who had never met in person coordinated investigations that rivaled professional audits. The evidence was undeniable, and the media finally took notice. A journalist from Milwaukee picked up our story, tracing it back to leaked memos and insider accounts. What started as a community effort became a national headline. Suddenly, Harley couldn't pretend the forums were just digital gossip. Law firms reached out. Regulators began asking questions. The company tried to issue new statements, softer words, promises of transparency. But we'd already read those memos. We knew better. They ignored our emails until the numbers went viral. That was the turning point. For years, Harley had controlled the narrative: heritage, freedom, rebellion. But when riders took control of the facts, that narrative cracked wide open. We didn't need their marketing anymore. We had our truth, our documentation, our brotherhood. We proved that community could do what corporations refused to: protect the people who actually live on two wheels. And once Washington got wind of it, Harley's problems left the garage and entered Congress. Regulators step in. For years, Harley acted like no one could touch them. They wrapped themselves in chrome and heritage, counting on the legend to shield them from accountability. But legends don't silence evidence. When the forum data, leaked memos, and rider testimonies finally reached Washington, the story changed. Investigators from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration began asking the questions Harley had spent decades dodging. Suddenly, the company that once defined rebellion was being forced to answer for its own. Hearings were scheduled. Subpoenas landed in Milwaukee. Federal inspectors demanded access to the same internal reports riders had been begging to see for years. The tone in Harley's press releases shifted overnight, from denial to cooperation, from pride to panic. For the first time, the balance of power tilted toward the riders. Finally, one mechanic said during a televised hearing, someone with power listened to the powerless. The investigation exposed everything we had known: ignored warnings, falsified inspection records, and profit over safety decisions that read like a checklist of betrayal. Regulators issued fines, but the real penalty wasn't financial, it was moral. The company's name, once synonymous with freedom, was now tied to deception. Riders watched with mixed feelings. Justice was coming, but it felt hollow. We shouldn't have needed Washington to make them listen, but justice doesn't only come from courtrooms. It also rises from the factory floor. The workers draw the line. Inside the Milwaukee plant, something changed. The same workers who once kept their heads down began speaking up. They had built these machines, bolt by bolt, believing they were crafting symbols of pride. Now they realized the company had been gambling with that pride for years. Union meetings grew crowded. Voices that had been silent through layoffs and restructuring began to rise. "We build bikes, not balance sheets," one welder said, slamming his fist on the table. It wasn't just about bad parts, it was about broken trust. The workforce had seen management ignore their warnings, outsource components, and push impossible production goals. Skilled machinists who once signed off on perfection were told to keep the line moving. But the scandal gave them leverage. Workers refused overtime until new safety standards were reinstated. Engineers demanded full transparency and quality testing. They weren't striking for money. They were striking for integrity. The media started calling it the rebellion within the rebellion. Harley's executives tried to paint it as routine labor noise, but everyone knew it was bigger. It was a reckoning inside the walls. The same people who built the Street Glide were reclaiming what it meant to wear the badge. Pride was no longer a slogan, it was an act of resistance. The workers drew their line, and for once, management had to listen. While the factory fought for its soul, the brand itself stood trial in the court of public opinion. The brand on trial. Harley-Davidson wasn't just a company, it was an identity. It sold freedom, rebellion, and heritage in every tank badge and every ad. But when the scandals broke wide open, that image shattered. Investors panicked, stock prices dipped, and analysts started using words Harley had long avoided: ethical collapse. For the first time in its history, the company's greatest asset, its legend, became its biggest liability. The question echoed across the industry. Had Harley forgotten who built their empire? Riders began speaking louder than shareholders. Rallies that once celebrated new models turned into protests demanding accountability. "You can't trademark trust," one veteran shouted at a press event. The message was clear. Harley's future wouldn't be decided in boardrooms, but in the hearts of the riders who kept it alive. Corporate apologies came, polished and hollow, promising reform, sustainability, and a renewed commitment to customer satisfaction. We'd heard it all before. Words don't fix stripped bolts. Still, something beautiful emerged from the chaos. Independent builders and small American shops started thriving. Custom mechanics, once overshadowed by factory prestige, became heroes again. The old spirit of rebellion returned, but this time it wasn't Harley selling it. It was the riders reclaiming it. The brand may survive the scandal, but the soul of Harley now belongs to the people who refuse to let it die. And as the smoke cleared, one truth remained. The road ahead belongs to us. Our road ahead. This story was never just about engines or memos. It was about trust, brotherhood, and the right to demand honesty from those who claim to ride with us. The Street Glide scandal ripped open everything Harley tried to hide, but it also revealed something stronger: the unity of riders who refused to be silenced. We've proven that a community armed with truth is more powerful than a corporation armed with lawyers. Now, it's time to decide what comes next. If you own a Harley, check your VIN and know what's truly under your tank. Speak up, document every flaw, and support the independent builders who value craft over cost. Every honest mile you ride proves the legend belongs to us, not corporations. The open road is ours, and the roar means freedom only when it's built on truth. The rebellion isn't over. It's just shifting gears. When the engines go quiet, truth is the only sound that matters. We've exposed the lies, the losses, and the riders who paid the price. But this isn't the end. It's ignition. The road ahead belongs to us now. Keep riding, keep questioning, and never let loyalty silence honesty again. Stay loud.